Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're going to travel back in time, not just to learn about history, but to try and live in it. Our destination is the Inca Empire, high up in the Andes Mountains, and our mission is to figure out what it meant to be beautiful in a world so different from our own. This isn't your typical history lesson about battles and kings. This is about the intimate, everyday standards of beauty. And let's be real, given the altitude and the lack of modern amenities, you'd probably be more worried about breathing than looking good on your first day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other people like you, who enjoy a quiet, story-driven drift into the past. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Tell me your city and the time right now in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see where we all are in the world as we settle in for the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the air. It is thin, almost impossibly crisp, and it carries a chill that bites at your exposed skin. Even under the powerful mountain sun, you're standing on a wide, stone-paved road, just outside what feels like the center of the world. This is Cusco, the capital of Tahuantinsuyu, the Inca Empire, or as they call it, the land of the four quarters. Before you, the city unfolds not as a set of ruins, but as a living, breathing entity. The buildings are made of immense, perfectly fitted stones, so precise you can't slip a knife blade between them. It is a feat of engineering that makes you feel small and a little out of place. The roofs aren't stone, though they're thick, golden brown thatch, steeply pitched to shed the heavy rains you've heard so much about. You start walking, your modern shoes feeling clumsy on the ancient stones. The streets are a river of people. They flow around you, their movements efficient and purposeful. You notice their stature first, generally shorter than you might be used to, but with a sturdy, powerful build. Their legs are strong, their chests broad, a physical adaptation to a life lived at 11. Their feet. Their skin tones are a beautiful tapestry of bronze, copper, and warm brown, weathered by sun and wind. You see faces that are strikingly different from one another, some with high, sharp cheekbones and aquiline noses, others with rounder, softer features. It is your first lesson. This is an empire, a vast collection of conquered peoples, and that diversity is written on every face you see. They are all subjects of the Inca, but they carry the maps of their homelands in their bones and on their skin. Their airs smell to the city, a mixture of damp earth, wood smoke from countless cooking fires, and something else, a musky, animal scent. You see llamas, their expressions a mixture of aloofness and mild curiosity, being led through the streets, their backs laden with goods. They are the trucks and trains of this empire, the clatter you're used to in a city. The rumble of wheels is absent. Here, the loudest sounds are human voices speaking in a language you don't understand, the soft padding of sandalwood feet, and the occasional braying of a llama. As you navigate the throng, you start to notice the details of their appearance. The people are, by and large, incredibly clean. Their faces are washed, their hands well kept despite the evidence of hard work. This is one of the first things that shatters any preconceived notions you might have had about primitive societies. The Inca were famously meticulous about hygiene. But what truly captures your attention? The one feature that seems to unite almost everyone you see. From the noble-looking man striding past in a fine tunic to the woman selling potatoes from a colorful woven blanket. Is their hair? It is, without exception, long, thick, and a stunning shade of glossy, jet black. It hangs down their backs in heavy, straight curtains or is intricately braided. You see no other colors, no other styles. It is like an unspoken uniform, a fundamental pillar of their identity. You watch a young woman turn her head, her low, dark braid swinging like a pendulum. It catches the sunlight, shimmering with an almost metallic luster. You realize you're staring. It is more than just hair. It is a statement. It speaks of health, of heritage, of a life lived in harmony with this harsh, beautiful land. And here, in the heart of the empire, you're beginning to understand that to be beautiful is not just about the face or the body, but about how you fit into the grand, ordered cosmos of the Inca world. Historians still debate the exact social dynamics of a regular day in Cusco, trying to filter the truth from the heavily biased accounts of the Spanish who would later arrive. But as you stand here, a silent observer, you don't need a textbook. You can feel it. You are an outsider. And the first and most obvious clue is that your hair probably isn't up to standard. You continue your walk, but now your focus is entirely consumed by this single, unifying feature, the hair. It's not just an accessory. You're starting to sense it as a language all its own. You pass a man of clear importance. His tunic is woven with intricate geometric patterns, and his earlobes are stretched. But it is his hair that commands respect. It is cut in a very specific style, long in the back, but with a severe, straight fringe across his forehead, almost touching his eyebrows. This, you will later learn, is a hairstyle often reserved for men of a certain standing, a marker of their ethnic, group or social role within the complex imperial hierarchy. A woman follows in, her own hair parted perfectly down the middle, too thick, identical braids falling over her shoulders and reaching well past her waist. The precision of the part, the tightness of the weave, it all speaks of time, care, and a deep-seated cultural value. There is a profound sense of order in their appearance that mirrors the stone walls of the city itself. You find a spot on some sun-warmed steps to sit and observe, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. You watch a mother with her child. The little girl's hair is just as black and glossy as her mother's, tied back with a simple woven cord. The mother absently runs her fingers through it, her touch gentle but firm, detangling a small knot. It is a casual, loving gesture, but it is also an act of cultural transmission. She is teaching her daughter, without words, that this is your crown, this is your strength. You must care for it. In the Inca worldview, health was beauty. A full, shining head of hair was the most obvious sign that you were strong, well-fed, and free from disease. It was a walking, talking advertisement for your vitality and your family as prosperity. In a society without complex medical diagnostics, your hair told the story of your inner health. This is why losing one's hair was not just a matter of vanity. It was a catastrophe. You will come to learn a rather chilling fact. One of the most severe public punishments, reserved for adulterers or those who committed serious crimes against the state, was to have their hair forcibly shorn. It was a mark of profound disgrace, a public stripping of one's identity and honor. To be seen with shorn hair was to be socially dead. You would be an outcast, a walking symbol of shame for all to see. The psychological weight of this punishment is hard to overstate. It meant that your long hair was just beautiful. It was proof of your good standing, your adherence to social norms, your very right to belong. Suddenly, The sight of all this flowing, healthy hair takes on a new weight. It is a collective badge of honor. You wonder how they do it. What is the secret? The high-altitude sun is harsh. The wind is relentless. And life involves hard, physical labor. Yet, you see no split ends, no frizz, no sun-bleached streaks. Just this impossible, uniform blackness and health. This is a topic that historians and archaeologists still puzzle over. Was it purely genetic, a gift of their ancestry, or was it the sophisticated hair care regimen? The Spanish chroniclers who documented Inca life were more interested in gold and governance than shampoo, so the details are sparse. However, local knowledge suggests they used natural detergents. The roots and bark of certain plants, like the sage apera or soapberry, produce a natural lather when mixed with water. They wouldn't strip the hair of its natural oils, but would cleanse it effectively. Furthermore, there is evidence they used specific plant-based concoctions to enhance the color. Certain leaves and seeds, when crushed, could create a dark dye, used not just to cover the occasional gray hair that might appear with age, but to deepen and enrich the natural blackness, giving it that vibrant, almost blue-black, she knew rays saying everywhere. The debate continues. Was this deep black color the result of a universally applied plant dye, a testament to their botanical knowledge, or was it simply the product of a nutrient-rich diet and superior genes? The truth is likely a combination of all three. As you sit there, you see a young man lean his head against a wall, his hair fanning out behind him. It is so long it pools on the stone step below it. He seems entirely at ease, unaware of the powerful statement his very existence is making. In this world, your hair tells everyone who you are, where you come from, and whether you are a person of virtue and health. It is the first page of your story, read by everyone you meet before you've even spoken a word. As you continue to people watch, your eyes start to adjust to the finer details of their faces. You've processed the hair, the skin, the general physique. Now you're noticing their expressions, the way their features are arranged. And that is when you see it. A woman haggling over a piece of pottery turns her head, and for a moment, you're taken aback. Her eyebrows are connected, very soft. Dark line of hair runs straight across the bridge of her nose, joining her brows into one continuous, expressive feature. You think it might be an anomaly, a personal quirk, but then you see it again, on a young man leading a llama, and again, on an older woman weaving a blanket. It is not a bug. It is a feature, a very deliberate one. You start to look for it specifically, and you realize it is everywhere. Here, in the heart of the Inca Empire, the unibrow, or as it is more elegantly called, a sinofries, is not something to be tweezed, waxed, or lamented. It is a mark of profound beauty. It is considered incredibly desirable. For the Inca, a strong, unbroken brow line was seen as a sign of fierce spirit and intelligence. It framed the eyes, the windows to the soul, with a bold, declarative statement. It was the opposite of the pluck. High-arched brows you might be familiar with. This was a look that was grounded, powerful, and intense. You watch a group of young women chatting near a fountain, and you can see the variations. Some are naturally blessed with this feature, their dark brows meeting in a soft, feathery union. Others, you notice, have clearly given nature a helping hand. You can just make out a slightly different texture, a deeper blackness between their brows. They've enhanced it. They used a type of soot or a dark powdered mineral, mixing it with a little fat to create a rudimentary cosmetic pencil. and carefully filled in the gap. The goal was to create a single, bold, horizontal line. It is a fascinating act of self-adornment, turning a genetic trait into a full-blown aesthetic standard. Why? The exact reasoning is one of those things lost to time, but historians have some compelling theories. One idea is that it was seen as mirroring the features of certain powerful animals in their cosmology, like the jaguar or the puma, whose facial markings often include strong, connected lines. To emulate this was to borrow a sliver of the animal's spiritual power and ferocity. Another theory, more practical, is that in a society that valued strength, a strong brow was simply seen as an indicator of a strong character. It was a no-nonsense look, projecting an image of seriousness and capability. There was no room for frivolity in the aesthetics of the Inca. Beauty was tied to function and meaning. You see a man look directly at you for a fleeting second. His gaze is intense, and his unibrow seems to accentuate it, making his stare feel even more direct and penetrating. It is a little intimidating. This aesthetic choice completely changes the resting expression of the face. It adds a layer of gravity, a hint of a scowl even in repose, which in their culture might have been interpreted as thoughtfulness or authority. This is a cold, hard piece of beauty trivia. While Frida Kahlo would later popularize the unibrow as a symbol of rebellious, unconventional beauty in the 20th century, here in the 15th century Andes, it was the mainstream, coveted ideal. The practice of enhancing the brow was not limited by gender. Men and women alike partook in this. It was a universal signifier of attractiveness. You can imagine young people anxiously checking their reflections in a polished obsidian mirror or a still pool of water, wondering if their brows were sufficiently connected, perhaps asking a friend for a bit of charcoal to touch up the bridge of their nose. It is a deeply human act of insecurity and vanity, one that transcends time and culture. Scholars are still trying to piece together the full cultural significance from pottery decorations and the rare pre-colonial textile, as the Spanish, with their own very different ideas about facial hair and grooming, mostly just found it strange and didn't bother to ask why. But as you look around at these strong, striking faces, you have to admit, it works. In the context of their world, under the harsh Andean sun, against the backdrop of their powerful architecture, the unibrow doesn't look odd at all. It looks right. Now that UV had a moment to absorb the hair and makeup, you start to pay more attention to what everyone is wearing. The clothing, at first glance, seems remarkably simple, almost uniform in its basic design. But as you look closer, you realize that this simplicity is deceptive. Let us start with your own hypothetical outfit, just to get you blending in. If you were presenting as male, your primary garment would be the anku. Picture a sleeveless tunic, essentially a large, rectangular piece of finely woven cloth, folded in half and sewn up the sides, with openings left for your arms and a slit cut in the middle for your head. It is simple, practical, and surprisingly comfortable. It hangs down to about your knees, allowing for complete freedom of movement, essential for navigating the steep mountain terraces and for the physical labor that underpin the empire. Beneath the anku, you wear a loincloth, or wore a basic garment worn from a young age. The tunic is your public-facing piece, the canvas upon which your identity is painted. For now, as a newcomer, yours would be plain, undyed camelid wool, probably from a llama or alpaca. It is warm, durable, and a bit scratchy. You feel the rough texture against your skin, a caustic reminder of your humble status in this new environment. If you're presenting as female, your core garment is the MNAAHP, which is an even simpler concept. It is a single, large rectangular piece of cloth that you wrap around your body, passing it under your arms and securing it at the shoulders with long, straight pins. It extends all the way down to your ankles. A large, straight dress held together by sheer cleverness and a couple of essential accessories we'll get to later. Over this, you wear a wide, intricately woven belt called a chumpai, which cinches the dress at the waist, giving it shape and keeping everything secure. The belt itself is a work of art, but the main clothing item is this masterfully draped cloth. To complete the outfit, especially in the cool mountain air, you have a el licola. This is a square shawl or mantle, worn over the shoulders and fastened at the front. It has both a practical layer for warmth and another key place to display beautiful textiles. You look around at the people flowing through the streets of Cusco. Everyone is wearing some variation of this basic uniform. The genius of it is its adaptability. In the warmer, lower altitude valleys of the empire, the cloth would be a lighter cotton. Up here in the highlands, it has the thick, insulating wool of alpacas and the even finer, softer wool of vicuna S for the elite. The cut of the clothes doesn't change much, but the material is perfectly suited to the environment. This is a point that historians often emphasize. Inca fashion was, above all else, practical. There were no frivolous additions, no trailing sleeves or complicated fastenings to get in the way of a day's work. But here's the interesting part you're starting to notice. While the shapes are the same, the details are wildly different. It is like everyone is wearing the same model of car, but each one has a unique paint job. This is the key to understanding Inca dress. Conformity in form, but infinite variety in decoration. You see a group of men who are clearly not from Cusco. Their tunics are a slightly different length, and the patterns woven into them are completely different from the geometric designs of the capital. One has a repeating bird motif, another a series of interlocking steps. These aren't just pretty patterns. They are broadcasting information. This is the cold, hard fact of your first day's attire. You're playing. Undyed tunic dress screams foreigner or commoner. It has no story. It tells the world you have no specific regional identity, no notable lineage, no special skills. You are a blank slate. To get a better tunic, you wouldn't just go to a market and buy one. The cloth itself was one of the most valuable commodities in the empire, used as a form of currency and tribute. The patterns were deeply tied to one's ALLU, or kinship group, and community. A new set of clothes was a significant acquisition, often woven by the women of your own family. The idea that historians still debate is the degree of strictness. Was wearing a pattern from a region you didn't belong to a punishable offense, a form of cultural appropriation? The consensus leans towards yes. Your clothing was your passport, your ID card, and your family tree, all woven into one. And right now, yours is completely blank. You start to focus on the textiles themselves, and a whole new layer of the world opens up to you. The clothes aren't just clothes. They ray books. Every thread, every color, every pattern is a word in a complex visual language that you ray only just beginning to decipher. You see a man walking by, and his unku is covered in a mesmerizing checkerboard pattern of black and white. Around his neck, he has a collar of red and white triangles. This isn't a random fashion choice. This is the uniform of an Inca military officer. The checkerboard signifies his role, his authority, his place in the state's hierarchy. The men under his command would wear simple, less refined tunics, but the visual link would be unmistakable. They belong together. Then you see a procession of nobles. Their tunics and mantles are a world away from the common will you ray imagining on yourself. The fabric is impossibly soft and drapes with a liquid grace. This is Ampi cloth, the finest textile in the empire, woven from the downy fleece of the vicuña, a wild relative of the alpaca. Vicuña fiber is one of the finest and rarest natural fibers in the world. Even today, in the Inca Empire, it was strictly reserved for the Seba Inca and the highest echelons of nobility. To wear a Ampi tunic was a privilege granted by the Inca himself. It was a physical manifestation of royal favor. The patterns on these elite garments are stunningly complex. They feature abstract, geometric designs called tukapu. You see small, intricate squares, each containing a unique symbol, a stepped pyramid, a swirling spiral, a stylized pluma. These aren't just decoration. Most historians believe that tukapu were a form of symbolic communication, a graphic system that could convey information about a person's lineage, rank, and possibly even specific historical events. The full meaning is something scholars are still intensely debating and trying to crack. Was it a true writing system, a proto-cuneiform for the Andes, or was it more like European heraldry, a system of symbolic emblems? The consensus is leaning toward the latter, but the mystery remains tantalizing. As you look at the noblesse tunic, you realize you're not just looking at a piece of clothing. You're looking at a document, a resume woven in thread. The colors are just as important as the patterns. The vibrant reds, the deep blues, the brilliant yellows. These were not easy to achieve. They were the product of a sophisticated understanding of natural dyes. That brilliant crimson, it comes from the cusco, a tiny insect that lives on cacti. It takes tens of thousands of dried insects to produce a single pound of dye. That deep indigo blue, it required a complex fermentation process. These colors were a display of wealth and power, not just because they were beautiful, but because they represented control over resources and specialized knowledge from all corners of the vast empire. The cusco might come from the dry coastal regions, the indigo from the jungle fringes. A single garment could be a map of the Inca's domain. Here's a quirky detail you notice. The seams. On the common tunics, the seams are visible, sturdy, and functional. On the Ampi cloth of the nobles, they are almost invisible. The pieces of cloth are joined with such meticulous skill that the garment appears to be a single, seamless whole. This level of craftsmanship was a point of immense pride. It was another subtle, but clear, indicator of status. Even the quality of your stitching taught. You look back at your imaginary plain tunic. It has the equivalent of showing up to a black tie gala in a paper sack. It has not just that you look poor. You look insignificant. You have no story to tell. Your clothes don't speak of your ancestors, your community, or your role in the great imperial machine. In the Inca world, you wore your identity. It was woven into the very fabric of your being. To be beautiful was to have a rich, complex, and well-defined pattern. And the most beautiful people were the ones whose clothes told the most powerful stories. The Seba Inca himself was said to own a vast collection of tunics, each one a masterpiece of textile art. And famously, he would never wear the same garment twice. Once worn, it was stored away as a sacred object, a testament to a single day in the life of a god king. As you wander further into the residential quarters of Cusco, away from the grand plazas, you start to notice the people on a more intimate level. You see families going about their daily lives. It is here that you witness the most striking and, to your modern eyes, the most extreme form of physical alteration practiced by the Inca and their subject peoples. Cranial modification. You see a baby, swaddled tightly in a colorful blanket, cradled in its mother's arms. and you notice the shape of its head. It is not round. It seems to be subtly elongated, sloping backwards. The mother adjusts the blanket, and you see the bindings. A set of padded boards and tightly wrapped cloths that are gently but persistently reshaping the infant's skull. Your first reaction is probably shock, maybe even a hint of alarm. But as you look around, you see it as not an isolated case. Many of the adults you've been observing have distinctly shaped heads. Some are long and conical, like a sugar loaf. Others are flattened at the back and widened at the sides. It is a deliberate, culturally significant practice that begins just days after birth, when the skull is still soft and pliable, and continues for the first few years of a child's life. The bindings are adjusted as the child grows, carefully guiding the skull into a specific, predetermined shape. It sounds painful, but archaeologists who have studied the skulls generally agree that when done correctly, the process was likely not harmful to the individual and did not affect brain development. This wasn't a universal link of practice, but rather a custom of many of the different ethnic groups that were brought under Inca rule. The Inca state, and its organizational genius, not only allowed but in some cases even encouraged these groups to maintain their traditional head shapes. Why? Because it was an instant identifier. In a sprawling, multilingual empire, you could tell where someone was from and what their social standing was, just by looking at the shape of their head. A man from the coastal plains might have a broader, fatter skull, while someone from the Titicaca Basin might have the distinctively long, tapered head you're seeing now. It was the ultimate ethnic marker, more permanent than any hairstyle or tunic. It was a way of inscribing your identity, your heritage, and your place in the cosmos directly onto your body. You were literally molded by your culture. You see an old man with a profoundly elongated skull, the skin pulled taut over his high forehead. His expression is one of serene dignity. To him, and to everyone around him, the shape of his head isn't a deformity. It's a sign of nobility, of belonging to a proud lineage. It's beautiful. It connects him to his ancestors and to the sacred geography of his homeland. Some groups believe that their ancestors had emerged from a specific mountain, or a PU, and they shaped their children's heads to mimic the shape of that sacred peak. This is a deep and complex topic that scholars are still unpacking. It wasn't just about ethnic identity. Within a single group, the degree of modification might signify social status. A more pronounced elongation could mark you as a member of the elite. So, not only did your head shape say I'm from Kola territory, it might also say my family is in charge here. It's a fascinating and slightly unsettling example of how far a culture will go to encode social information onto the human body. One of the weirder cold facts about this is the variety. Archaeologists have identified dozens of different head shapes across the Andes, from the subtly modified to the truly extreme, each with its own cultural significance. As you watch the mother gently rocking her baby, you realize the immense cultural pressure at play. To not bind your child's head would be to deny them their heritage, to leave them without a key piece of their identity. It would be like refusing to give them a name. The child would grow up looking like an outsider within their own community. The beauty standard here was about achieving a universal ideal of a round head. It was about achieving the correct head for your people. It was a beauty of belonging, a physical manifestation of the proverb, "This is who we are." And as you look at the diverse head shapes moving through the city, you see not a collection of oddities, but a living library of the many peoples who make up this powerful empire. You, Ray, still trying to wrap your head around the idea of head shaping, and 1,000 questions bubble up. Was it safe? Did it cause headaches? Did it, as some early and now discredited theories suggest it, actually change their intelligence or personality. You find yourself near a group of men who are clearly engaged in some sort of official business. They carry knotted strings, or quipas, the Inca's unique recording device. Their foreheads are high and sloping, a clear sign of cranial modification. They speak with authority, and people listen. It has a direct visual contradiction to any notion that the practice diminished their cognitive abilities. This is where you stumble into one of the biggest ongoing debates among Andean scholars. What was the primary motivation for this practice? The most common and widely accepted theory, as you've already gathered, is that it was a marker of ethnic and social identity. In a vast, diverse empire, it was a biological passport. It prevented social chaos. You knew who was who at a glance. It reinforced the highly organized, hierarchical structure of Inca society. This theory is supported by the fact that the Inca administration seemed to favor the continuation of the practice among their subject peoples. It made them easier to manage, to count, to tax, and to conscript for labor or military service. But another, more provocative theory is that it was purely about aesthetics. Perhaps, in its origins, it was simply seen as beautiful. It is not so different. Some argue, from modern practices like braces to straighten teeth, or cosmetic surgery to change the shape of a nose. It was a way of perfecting the human form according to a specific cultural blueprint of beauty. Proponents of this idea point to ancient pottery, especially from the Mac and Nazca cultures that preceded the Inca, where figures with elaborately shaped heads are depicted in heroic or divine contexts. The head shape itself was associated with power, divinity, and grace. To have an elongated head was to look more like the gods. Then there's a third, more functionalist argument that historians are still chewing on. Some researchers have proposed that certain head shapes were believed to bestow specific qualities or skills. For example, a particular shape might be thought to make a man a fiercer warrior, or a woman more skilled at weaving. There is little direct evidence for this, but it is an intriguing idea. It suggests that the modification was just about identity or beauty, but about trying to shape a child's destiny, to physically imbue them with desirable traits. Could you, by shaping the skull, also shape the mind within? It is a question that borders on pseudoscience, but it reflects a worldview where the physical and spiritual were deeply intertwined. The debate is fueled by the silence of the Inca themselves. They had no written language in the way we understand it, so we have no texts from them explaining. We do this because all our information is filtered through archaeology, the skulls themselves, and the often biased accounts of the Spanish conquistadors. The Spanish, for their part, were generally horrified by the practice. They saw it as a barbaric custom of a heathen people and did their best to stamp it out as part of their campaign of religious and cultural conversion. Their chronicles describe the practice, but often fail to grasp the nuances of why it was done, attributing it to a general sense of pagan strangeness. This is the classic historians are still arguing moment. Was it a too love imperial administration, a standard of abstract beauty, an attempt to engineer better humans? The most likely answer is that it was all of the above, in varying degrees, depending on the specific culture and time period. For one group, it might have been primarily about honoring an ancestor. For another, it was a vital political statement. For a third, it might have been a bit of both, plus the simple fact that they found it beautiful. The meaning was likely fluid and multifaceted. You watch one of the quipu-carrying officials turn and give an order. His elongated head, framed by his severe fringe and dark, connected eyebrows, gives him an air of otherworldly intelligence and authority. In this moment, you don't see a medical curiosity. You see a man perfectly adapted to his cultural environment, his very bones shaped by the values of his people. The why might be a puzzle for future academics, but the what is right in front of you, the powerful, living symbol of identity. So profound it was written in bone. You drift back towards the main plaza, the Hauke Potter, the ceremonial heart of Cusco. The space is vast, covered in fine gravel brought from distant rivers, and it is here that the true power of the empire is on display. It is here you finally see them. The Orejones, the big ears. This was the Spanish nickname for the Inca nobility. And as a group of them stride across the plaza, you immediately understand why. Their earlobes have been stretched to an astonishing degree, hanging down in long, thin loops of skin that, in some cases, almost touch their shoulders. Through these stretched lobes are inserted massive ear spools, thick cylindrical plugs made of gold, silver, or wood. The effect is mesmerizing and deeply intimidating. These aren't just fashion accessories. They are the ultimate status symbol, the unmistakable mark of the ruling class. The process began in their teenage years. As a rite of passage into manhood, young noble boys would have their ears pierced. Over the years, progressively larger and heavier spools were inserted, gradually stretching the lobe. The size of the spool and the material it was made from directly corresponded to their rank and lineage. The larger and more golden your earplugs, the more important you were. The Sapa Inca himself, and those of pure ancestral blood, were the largest and most magnificent spools of all, crafted from pure, shining gold. You watch one of the Orejones turn his head. The sun catches the polished gold of his ear spool, and it flashes like a miniature sun. It has a deliberate effect, linking him to Inti, the sun god, from whom the royal Inca dynasty claimed direct descent. They were, in a very literal sense, wearing their divinity for all to see. The sheer weight of the spools must have been a constant physical reminder of their status and the responsibilities that came with it. It was not a comfortable beauty. It was a beauty of power, of endurance, of a right to rule so profound it was physically inscribed onto their bodies. This is a key historical point. Not just anyone could decide to stretch their ears. This was a privilege strictly controlled by the state. Only those of true Inca blood, the ethnic Inca who originated from the Cusco Valley, and certain individuals who were granted the status of Inca by privilege by the emperor were allowed to do this. An ambitious man from a conquered province couldn't just start stretching his ears to get ahead. To do so would be an act of rebellion, a capital offense. It was illegally protected. Exclusive aesthetic. The Orejones were a class apart, and their ears were the wall that separated them from the millions of commoners they ruled. You can't help but stare, and you notice Sabas are little detail. The stretched lobes are so long and thin that they are also vulnerable. An accidental snag on a bridge, or a pull in a scaffold, could easily tear the lobe. And indeed, some of the older nobles you see have one or both lobes torn, the loop of skin hanging into separate strands. While this might seem like a disfigurement, historians debate how this was perceived. Was a torn lobe a mark of shame, a sign of carelessness, or was it, perhaps, a battle scar, a sign of a long life lived in service to the empire, its own kind of honorific? The evidence is inconclusive, but it highlights the risks associated with this particular standard of beauty. The Spanish, upon their arrival, were both fascinated and repulsed by the Orejones. They recognized it as a sign of nobility, which is why they gave them their name. But they also saw it as yet another example of the unnatural customs of the New World. In their quest to dismantle the Inca power structure, they actively suppressed the practice. The ear spools, especially the golden ones, were among the first things to be melted down. The practice of ear stretching faded away with the fall of the empire, leaving behind only the descriptions in chronicles and the occasional depiction on pottery. As the group of nobles passes, you are left with a sense of awe. Their elongated heads, their severe hairstyles, their fine vicuna tunics, and now, their golden, sun-catching ears. It is a complete aesthetic package, a carefully constructed image of absolute power. To be beautiful, in this context, wasn't about being pretty. It was about being imposing. It was about looking like you were born to rule the known world. And as they disappear into the stone corridors of a royal palace, you have no doubt that they have achieved exactly that. Your attention now shifts to the women. While the men have their dramatic ear spools, the women of the Inca Empire have their own distinct and beautiful forms of adornment. You see a woman of some standing pause to adjust her la, the elegant shawl over her shoulders. What catches your eye is the object she uses to fasten it. Alone, gleaming pin, or TUPU. It is not a simple safety pin. This is a significant piece of jewelry, a personal statement, and a practical all in one. The pin itself is long and straight, made of copper, bronze, silver, or, for the truly elite, gold. At the top, it flares out into a large, flat, circular or crescent-shaped head. This head is often intricately decorated. You get a closer look at one. The head is a perfect disc of hammered silver, about the size of a small coaster. It has been polished to a high shine and is engraved with delicate geometric patterns that echo the tukapu on the fine textiles. Some were even more elaborate, featuring small figures or inlaid with precious stones like turquoise or spawn YLS shell. The TUPU was the primary piece of jewelry for an Andean woman. It was a sign of her wealth, her social standing, and her marital status. A young, unmarried woman might wear a smaller, simpler one. Upon marriage, she would receive a larger, more ornate pair from her husband's family. A key part of the wedding ritual, she would use them to fasten her ornate the wraparound dress, and each shoulder. The la was then fastened with a third, often even more impressive, TUPU at the chest. The beauty of the TUPU was twofold. It was, of course, a display of precious metal and craftsmanship, but it was also functional in a very elegant way. The large, flat head was just for show. On a sunny day, it would catch the light, creating a flash of brilliance as the woman moved, much like the man's ear spools. It was a subtle but effective way to draw attention and project an aura of importance, and he was a fascinating and somewhat debated little fact. The sharp end of the TUPU was just for pinning cloth. It was a multi-tool. A woman could use it to clean her fingernails, to part her hair with perfect precision, or, if the need arose, as a small defensive weapon. It was a symbol of femininity that was also practical and even a little bit dangerous. Beyond the TUPU, you notice other forms of jewelry. Bracelets, or chipona, adorn the wrists of both men and women of high status. Necklaces, while QA, are also common, especially for ceremonial occasions. These are not delicate chains but substantial creations made of beads carved from shell, bone, sieves, stone, and nuggets of gold or silver. The most prized material for beads was the fiery or red shell of the spawned YLS, a spiny oyster found only in the warm coastal waters of what is now Ecuador. This shell was considered more precious than gold. It was called the food of the gods and was deeply associated with water, fertility, and divine power. To wear a necklace of spawned yellow shell was to wear a piece of sacred geography, a symbol of the empire's reach and its control over powerful spiritual substances. You see a woman wearing a wall QA of alternating silver and spawned yellow beads. The contrast between the cool shine of the metal and the warm, vibrant glow of the shell is breathtaking. It is a statement of immense wealth and piety. The logistics required to get that shell from the coast, across deserts, and up into the high Andes made it an ultimate luxury good. Historians still marvel at the vast trade networks dedicated to this single type of shell, which highlights its central importance in Andean cosmology and aesthetics. The jewelry here is not frivolous. Every piece is laden with meaning. It tells a story about the wearer's identity, their connection to the sacred, and their place within the social order, while the men's jewelry emphasized their direct connection to the sun and the state. The women's jewelry, with its emphasis on tiapas and shells, seems to connect them to the moon, the earth, and the life-giving forces of water and fertility. The aesthetics were complementary, creating a balanced and harmonious whole. You look at a noble woman, her dark hair perfectly parted, her unibrow subtly enhanced, her fine mantle secured by a shining silver tupu. Her beauty is not just in her features, but in the complete, culturally rich package she presents. She is a living embodiment of Andean elegance. You continue your exploration, moving through the less formal parts of the city, and you become aware of something you didn't expect: the near-total absence of bad smells. In a dense, pre-industrial city, you'd anticipate a certain level of grime and odor, but Cusco feels remarkably clean. The stone-lined channels that run alongside many of the major streets aren't sluggish, foul-smelling sewers. They are carrying fresh, fast-moving water, diverted from mountain springs, and the people themselves seem to share this civic obsession with cleanliness. You wander down to a river that flows through the edge of the city. Here, even in the chilly morning air, you see people bathing. Men and women, though in separate areas, are washing themselves with an invigorating briskness. This isn't a once-a-week chore. It is a daily ritual. The Inca and their subjects placed an enormous value on personal hygiene. The Spanish chroniclers, who came from a Europe where bathing was oft unviewed with suspicion and linked to illness, were astonished by this. They wrote, with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment, about how the Inca would bathe in cold water every single day, regardless of the weather. This was just about getting clean. It was a deeply ingrained cultural and even spiritual practice. To be clean was to be pure, not just physically, but ritually. Water, or you, was a sacred element, a purifying force. Immersing yourself in it was a way to wash away not just dirt, but negative energies or spiritual impurities. Before participating in any important ceremony or religious rite, a period of fasting and bathing was almost always required, a beauty standard. Therefore, was just about how you looked, but about how you felt, and being clean was paramount. A person who was dirty was seen as lazy, disrespectful, and spiritually out of balance. You watch a woman washing her long, black hair in the river. She is not using a modern shampoo. Of course, she is rubbing the root of a plant into her scalp. This is the soap berry, or sachupir. That you'd heard about. She works it into a surprisingly rich lather, cleansing her hair without harsh chemicals. For their skin, they used other natural resources: Finely ground cornmeal could be used as an exfoliant, and clays from certain riverbeds were used for deep cleaning, much like a modern spot treatment. The Inca possessed a sophisticated botanical pharmacy, and a significant part of it was dedicated to cosmetics and hygiene. This obsession with cleanliness extended to their homes. You peek into a common or rest dwelling. It is a simple, one-room stone structure with a thatched roof. The floor is packed earth, but it has been swept clean. There are no piles of refuse inside. Household waste was meticulously collected and carried out of the city to be used as fertilizer on the agricultural terraces. This is a fascinating bit of urban planning that many European cities of the time had yet to figure out. The Inca understood the connection between sanitation and public health. This resulted in cities that were, by all accounts, remarkably healthy places to live, free from the plagues that so often devastated other parts of the world. Historians are still piecing together the full extent of their public health system. But the archaeological and written evidence all points to a society that was far ahead of its time in this regard. The complex network of aqueducts and channels wasn't just for irrigation. It was a comprehensive water management system that supplied the entire populace with fresh water for drinking and bathing. Some historians argue that this focus on hygiene was a key factor in the empire's stability. A healthy population is a productive population. A clean city is an orderly city. So, while you might have been worried about high-concept beauty standards like head shaping or golden ear spools, the most fundamental and non-negotiable standard of all was simply to be clean. Before you could even think about the color of your tunic or the shape of your eyebrows, you had to have washed your face, bathed your body, and combed your hair. It was the foundation upon which all other forms of adornment were built. You see a man emerge from the river, his skin glistening in the sun. He looks refreshed, energized, and pure. In the Inca world, this state of cleanliness was not just next to guidelines. It was a prerequisite for it, and it was a standard of beauty that was, remarkably, accessible to everyone, from the Sapa Inca to the humblest potato farmer. Now that you're attuned to the subtleties of Inca appearance, you start to notice the use of color on their skin. It is not makeup in the modern sense of contouring and concealing, but rather a form of ritual and social signaling. The most common and striking color you see is a vibrant reddish or orange. You see it on the faces of warriors, painted in bold stripes across their cheeks. You see it on the faces of young women, applied as a soft, circular blush high on their cheekbones. You even see it on the faces of children during a public festival, their foreheads marked with a dot of the same brilliant hue. This color comes from the seeds of the achio tree, known in English as the annatto tree. When you crush the seeds, which are contained in spiky, heart-shaped pods, they release a rich, oily paste that ranges in color from bright yellow to deep reddish or orange. This paste was a cosmetic staple across much of the ancient Americas, and the Inca were no exception. For them, this red color was deeply symbolic. It was associated with blood, with life, with warfare, and with ritual sacrifice. To paint your face with achio was to prepare yourself for an important event, to mark yourself as a participant in something sacred or significant. You watch a group of soldiers marching in formation. Their faces are set in grim, disciplined lines, and the red stripes painted under their eyes make them look even more fierce and intimidating. The paint was just for show. It was part of their battle preparation, a way to psychologically transform from a farmer into a warrior. It was a mask of courage. In a different context, you see a priest, his face also painted, but with a complex series of lines and dots that seem to follow a specific, symbolic pattern. His paint signifies his sacred role, his ability to communicate with the spiritual world. For women, the application was often more subtle. The soft blush on the cheeks wasn't necessarily about mimicking a natural flush of health. It was a beautifying ritual, a way to add color and life to the face. But it was still tied to a sense of occasion. It wasn't an everyday look for most people, but something reserved for dances, festivals, and ceremonies. A woman might also use the achio paste to color her lips, giving them a soft, reddish tint. It was a simple, but effective, way to enhance her features and signal her participation in the community as social life. Here's a little-known fact that historians find fascinating. The use of these pigments wasn't limited to the living. The Inca had a profound reverence for their ancestors, and they mummified their dead rulers and nobles. These mummies were not hidden away in tombs. They were kept in their palaces, treated as if they were still alive, and brought out for major ceremonies. And for these occasions, they would be dressed in fine clothes, and their mummified faces would be freshly painted with achio, a sign that they were still present, still powerful, still part of the community. The red paste was literally a color of life, applied even in death to signify eternal vitality. The debate among scholars is whether this facial painting was always purely ritualistic or if it had more mundane, practical applications. Some argue that the thick, oily paste might have offered some protection against the sun and wind, a sort of ancient sunblock. Others suggest it could have had insect-repellent properties. It's likely it served multiple purposes at once. It could be sacred, cosmetic, and practical all at the same time. A perfect example of the Inca's efficient, multi-layered approach to life. As you look around, you realize that a beautiful face in the Inca world wasn't a blank canvas. It was a face that told a story. The shape of your head told of your origin, your eyebrows of your spirit, and the paint on your skin told of your current state of being, whether you were celebrating, mourning, or preparing for war. The body was a site of communication. You see a young girl watching the soldiers march by, and she has a small, simple red circle on each cheek. She is too young for war or marriage, but she is part of the festival, part of the collective energy. The paint marks her as belonging. It has a temporary tattoo of community. And in this world, there was nothing more beautiful than that. You start a conversation, or rather, a series of gestures and smiles, with a woman selling vibrant, multi-colored corn at a small market stall. As she smiles back, you notice her teeth. They are strong, even, and remarkably free from decay. This seems to be the norm, while the occasional older person might show signs of wearing to floss. The general dental health of the population is surprisingly good, especially for a civilization without modern dentistry. How did they manage this? Part of the answer lies in their diet. While it was rich in carbohydrates like potatoes and corn, it was very low in processed sugar. The kind of rampant tooth decay caused by modern sugary diets was simply not a major issue. But they also had active methods of dental care. Archaeologists have found evidence that the Inca used fine, sharp thorns from certain plants, like the acacia tree, as toothpicks to clean between their teeth after meals. They also chewed on various plants and resins that had antiseptic properties, which would have helped to keep their gums healthy and their breath fresh. One of these was the resin from the malai tree, which was also used as a kind of all-purpose medicinal glue. Think of it as a natural, antibacterial chewing gum. However, no discussion of what the Inca chewed is complete without mentioning the most famous and controversial plant of the Andes, the coca leaf. You see it everywhere. People carry small, woven bags called chispa, filled with dried coca leaves. They'll take a few leaves, form them into a quid, and tuck it into their cheek, where they'll masticate it slowly throughout the day. You see farmers, messengers, priests, and nobles all chewing coca. It is a universal habit to activate the mild stimulant alkaloids in the leaves. They need a catalyst. You see people use a small stick to take a pinch of a white or gray powder and add it to the quid in their mouth. This powder is LLIPTA, a substance made from the ashes of quinoa stalks or other plants. The alkaline ash helps to release the active compounds from the cocoa leaves. The beauty standard here is subtle but important. To have a slight bulge in your cheek from a coca quid was a sign of normalcy, of being an active, functioning member of society. It was the ancient equivalent of carrying a cup of coffee. It staved off hunger, fatigue, and the effects of altitude sickness, making it essential for life and labor in the high Andes. But cocoa was much more than just a stimulant. It was a sacred plant, a gift from the gods. It was used in every single religious ceremony, offered to the pews, and read by priests to tell the future. The quality of your cocoa, even the beauty of your true spa bag were status symbols. A noble would have a bag woven from the finest vicuna wool with intricate takapu designs, and his leaves would be the freshest, most perfect specimens from the eastern slopes of the Andes. A commoner would have a simpler bag and more basic leaves. The effect on their appearance is a subject of some debate among historians. Some early Spanish accounts claimed that heavy coca use would stain the teeth a greenish black, but archaeological evidence doesn't fully support this as a universal outcome. It's more likely that the constant chewing, combined with the abrasive LLIPTA, would lead to significant wear on the tooth and enamel over a lifetime. So, a perfect smile for a venerable elder might not have been one of pearly whites, but one of teeth worn down by a life of hard work and ritual devotion. It was a sign of a life well lived. The Spanish had a complicated relationship with coca. At first, they saw it as a pagan ritual and tried to ban it, but they quickly realized that without coca, their indigenous labor for scalded function, especially in the brutal conditions of the silver mines. So, they relented and ended up controlling the coca trade themselves. This is a crucial point. The modern, highly processed drug that has caused so much harm is a world away from the traditional, ritualized use of the whole leaf by the Inca. For them, it was a source of energy, a social lubricant, and a sacred connector to the divine. An Inca person's smile, therefore, tells a complex story of a healthy diet, practical hygiene, and a deep, respectful relationship with the sacred plants of their world. It was a beauty rooted in sustenance and spirit. As you continue to observe the people of Cusco, you start to form a picture of the ideal body type, and it is likely very different from the images you are used to seeing in modern magazines. There is no emphasis on thinness here. In fact, to be skinny would be seen as a sign of illness, poverty, or weakness. The aesthetic ideal is one of strength, sturdiness, and capability. You watch a group of men working on a construction project, moving massive stones into place with an almost casual display of power. They are not lean and sculpted like modern gym goers. They are thick-set, with powerful torsos, broad shoulders, and muscular legs. Their bodies are the product of a lifetime of physical labor in a challenging environment. They are farmers who work the steep agricultural terraces, soldiers who march for weeks on end, and builders who create monumental architecture. A strong body was just attractive. It was essential for survival and for fulfilling your duty to the ALLU in the state. The same standard applies to women. You see women in the marketplace, carrying immense bundles of firewood or huge sacks of potatoes on their backs, held in place by a colorful woven cloth. They walk with a steady, grounded gait, their calves strong from a life of walking up and down hills. They are not delicate or waif-like. They are robust, capable, and radiate an aura of resilience. A beautiful woman was one who looked healthy and fertile, capable of bearing strong children and managing the considerable workload of an Andean household. This included farming, weaving, cooking, and raising children. A slender frame would have signaled an inability to perform these vital tasks. This is a key cultural difference. In many modern societies, beauty is often associated with leisure, a body that doesn't have to work. Here, beauty is intrinsically linked to work. It is a functional aesthetic. Your body is a tool, and a well-built, powerful tool is a beautiful one. There was the same concept of fat versus thin as a primary measure of attractiveness. The more important distinction was strong versus weak, or healthy versus sickly. Having a bit of extra body fat was the negative. It was a sign that you were well fed, that your family was prosperous, and that you had reserves of energy for hard times. In an environment where food security was a constant concern, a bit of plumpness was a symbol of success. Historians are still debating the nuances of this. Did they have ideals of proportion and symmetry? Almost certainly, as most human cultures do. But the overriding factor was this ideal of functional strength. This is reflected in their art. The human figures you see on Inca pottery and textiles are not depicted as lithe and ethereal. They are solid, grounded, and often shown in the act of working, fighting, or performing a ceremony. They are bodies of substance. You see a young couple walking together. They are both the picture of health. Their skin glows. Their hair is thick and glossy. And their bodies, clothed in their traditional tunics and dresses, look powerful and energetic. They laugh. And they're easy. Physical confidence is palpable. This, you realize, is the Inca ideal of beauty. It is not about achieving an extreme or artificial look. It's about embodying health, strength, and vitality. It's a beauty that comes from within, a direct reflection of a well-nourished body and a life lived in balance with a demanding land. This might be a refreshing change of pace for you. There is no pressure to be skinny, no obsession with dieting. The focus is on being strong and healthy enough to contribute to your community. A fascinating side note is that the Inca state, in its all-encompassing way, was deeply invested in the health of its people. The state managed massive storehouses of food, which were distributed in times of famine. It organized public health measures. A healthy, strong populace was the engine of the empire. So, in a way, achieving the ideal body type wasn't just a personal goal. It was a civic duty. By staying strong and healthy, you were serving the Saipa Inca. Your personal beauty was a reflection of the empire's collective strength. You be same commoners, soldiers, and nobles, but you have yet to witness the pinnacle of the Inca aesthetic. Then, one day, the plaza begins to fill with people. There is a buzz of anticipation in the air. The Saipa Inca, the Sol Inca, the emperor, the living son of the sun god, is going to make a public appearance. You find a place on the edge of the square, trying to see over the heads of the crowd. The reverence is absolute. People are silent, their eyes fixed on the royal palace. When he emerges, he is not walking. He is carried aloft on a magnificent litter, a golden throne shielded by a canopy of brilliant feathers. The men who carry him are high-ranking nobles, and they move with a slow, solemn grace. The sight of the Saipa Inca himself is almost blinding. He is less a man and more a living constellation of all the most precious things in the empire. His tunic is not made of wool, not even the finest vicuna. It is woven from the iridescent feathers of hummingbirds and other exotic birds from the Amazonian jungle. The tiny feathers have been painstakingly attached to a cotton backing, creating a shimmering, ethereal garment that seems to change color with every slight movement. It might be blue, then gray, then a flash of fiery orange. The labor required to create such a garment is almost impossible to comprehend. It represents the ultimate luxury, a mastery over the farthest and most vibrant corners of his domain. As you know, he will wear this tunic only once. Tomorrow, it will be ceremonial burned or stored away, and a new one, equally magnificent, will be ready for him. On his head, he wears the Ma's capuchon, the symbol of his supreme authority. It is not a crown of golden jewels in the European style. It is a more subtle, but profoundly significant headdress. It consists of a series of fine, braided cords wrapped around his forehead. From the front of this headband hangs a fringe of bright scarlet wool, with each strand encased in a tiny tube of gold. Above this, attached to the top of his head, are 2 or 3 long, black and white feathers from the corquinqueau, a sacred mountain caracara bird. These specific feathers were so rare that it was said only one pair of these birds existed at any one time, nesting on a sacred mountain peak. Only the Saipa Inca could wear them. The entire headdress is a concentrated symbol of his unique status as the axis of the cosmos. His ear spools are the largest and most brilliant you have ever seen, massive discs of pure gold that blaze in the sun. Around his neck is a heavy pectoral, also of gold, depicting Inti, the sun god. His wrists are heavy with golden bracelets. Even his sandals are golden soles. He holds a golden staff or scepter, a symbol of his power to command. The overall effect is one of divine radiance. He is literally dressed in the rarest and most sacred materials of the empire: the sun metal, gold, the sacred bird feathers, the life-blood color of the Casino dye. His beauty is not human. It is divine. It is designed to overwhelm the senses and reinforce his status as a god on earth. The Spanish conquistadors, men who were no strangers to the pomp of European courts, were utterly dumbfounded by the sheer opulence of the Saipa Inca's daily attire. Historians are still trying to fully decode the complex symbolism of every element of the royal regalia. Each color, each material, each feather had a specific meaning that communicated the Inca's divine right to rule, his connection to the mythical past, and his mastery over the present. A debate continues over the exact nature of his divinity. Was he seen as a literal god, or more as a divine intermediary, a man who had a unique hotline to the gods? The way he presented himself certainly leaned heavily into the literal god interpretation. As the litter passes, you avert your eyes, as all commoners were required to do. To look directly at the Saipa Inca was a transgression. You catch a final glimpse of his face. It is impassive, remote, as if he exists on a different plane of reality. His skin is smooth. His dark hair is perfectly coiffed. His unibrow is a stark line of authority. He is the perfect embodiment of the Inca ideal, the still point at the center of a sprawling, ever-moving world. To be beautiful, for the Saipa Inca, was to be a living idol, a manifestation of the sun itself, dressed in the concentrate iridescence of his empire. Your journey through the Inca world has shown you the beauty of warriors, nobles, and even the emperor himself. But there is another, almost mythical, class of people whose beauty was legendary, the ACOs, the chosen women or virgins of the sun. You won't see them walking freely in the streets of Cusco. They live in seclusion, in a special convent-like compound called the ACL Loazai, or House of the Chosen. The walls are high, and the only men allowed inside are the Sepa Inca and a few high-ranking priests. Who were these women? Every year, officials of the empire would travel through the provinces, inspecting villages and towns. Their task was to identify young girls, typically between the ages of 8 and 10, who had simplified the Inca ideal of beauty and talent. They were looking for flawless physical features, unblemished skin, thick glossy hair, and symmetrical faces. But they were also looking for grace and a sharp intelligence. The most beautiful and promising girls were chosen from their families and taken to the ACL Loazai in Cusco or other regional centers. For their families, this was a tremendous honor. It meant their daughter had been singled out for a life of divine service, and it elevated the family's social standing. Once inside the ACL Loazai, the girls began a life of rigorous training under the tutelage of older women, the Mamatura. 4 years, they would learn the most sacred and valuable skills in the empire. They became master weavers, creating the exquisite Cuampi cloth for the Sepa Inca and for religious rituals. They learned the art of brewing chicha, the sacred corn beer that was essential for every ceremony. They were taught songs, dances, and the intricate details of religious rites. They were, in essence, being cultivated as national treasures. Their beauty was no longer their own. It belonged to the state and the gods. They lived a life of chastity and devotion, dedicated to the service of Inti, the sun god. The most beautiful and spiritually pure among them were designated as virgins of the sun and would remain in the ACL Loazai for their entire lives, serving as priestesses in the cult of the sun. Theirs was a cloistered, ethereal beauty, spoken of in hushed, reverent tones by the common people. However, not all ACL Loas remained in the convent forever. This is where the story gets more complex, and where historians are still debating the exact nature of the institution. While some were dedicated to the sun for life, others were destined for a different, but equally high status, fate. When they came of age, the Sepa Inca could choose to take them as his secondary wives or concubines. To be chosen by the emperor was the highest possible honor. He could also bestow them as wives upon other men, high-ranking nobles, generals, or regional leaders whom he wished to reward or bind more closely to himself. To receive a wife from the ACL Loazai was a gift of unimaginable prestige. It meant your wife was not only beautiful, but also a master craftswoman, trained in the highest arts of the empire. It was a strategic, political use of beauty. The ACL Loazai were a human resource, a tool for forging alliances and reinforcing the loyalty of the elite. This dual role of the ACL Loazai, part sacred convent, part finishing school for the elite, is a topic of much scholarly discussion. Was it a place of religious devotion or a sophisticated system of human resource management? The answer is, characteristically, for the Inca, both. You can only imagine the scene inside the ACL Loazai, a tranquil courtyard filled with young women, all chosen for their perfection, their dark hair gleaming as they spin fine vicuna thread or chant ancient hymns. It would have been a world of profound femininity and concentrated skill. The hard and slightly sad fact is that these women, celebrated for their beauty, were almost entirely removed from public view. Their beauty became an abstract concept, a story whispered outside the high stone walls. They were the ultimate embodiment of a control state's ancient beauty, their lives and bodies dedicated entirely to the maintenance of the religious and political order. They were the hidden jewels of the empire, You're at a feast, a grand celebration in one of Cusco's main plazas. The air is thick with the savory smell of roasting llama meat and the sweet, earthy aroma of corn. But as a group of high-ranking nobles draws near, you catch a different scent, something subtle and refined that cuts through the heavier odors of the festival. It has a delicate, thorough, and slightly spicy fragrance. It has the scent of the Inca elite. While the common people were focused on the beauty of cleanliness, the nobility took it a step further. They didn't just want to be clean. They wanted to smell good. Perfume, in the Inca world, was another subtle marker of status, a luxury that set the upper classes apart. They didn't have liquid, alcohol-based perfumes like we do today. Their fragrances came in the form of scented powders, oils, and resins. These were not overpowering or cloying scents, but rather a personal aura of fragrance that you would only notice if you were standing close. One of the most prized sources of fragrance was, surprisingly, a type of dried seaweed. Certain varieties, when dried and crushed, released a pleasant, musky scent. This was mixed with other ingredients like talc or fine clay to create a fragrant body powder. Women, in particular, would dust this powder onto their skin after bathing, leaving them with a subtle, long-lasting scent. The fact that the seaweed had to be brought all the way from the Pacific Ocean made it an exotic luxury item. Another example of the nobility's ability to command resources from every corner of the empire. Flowers were another key ingredient. The Inca had a deep appreciation for flowers, and their gardens were filled with fragrant blooms. The petals of specific flowers, like the nucutsu or the canchutie, would be dried and crushed into powders. They could also be infused into animal fats or vegetable oils to create a scented ointment or pomade. A noble woman might rub a small amount of this fragrant oil onto her wrists and neck, or even work it into the ends of her long hair. This is where we find a strange and specific piece of aromatic trivia. The Inca were particularly fond of the scent of a resin called malai. We've already met it as a sort of chewing gum, but it's fragrant. Peppery smoke was also used as a powerful incense to purify temples and homes. The elite, however, found a more personal use for it. They would sometimes burn the resin and allow the fragrant smoke to permeate their clothes before they put them on. Imagine getting dressed for a royal event by literally smoking your tunic. It was a time-consuming and extravagant process, but it would leave the wearer with a unique, smoky, and sacred aroma all day long. The use of these scents was, like everything else, highly regulated by social custom. The Sapa Inca himself was said to favor a particularly rare and potent blend of fragrances, a scent that was uniquely his. For a lesser noble, to imitate the emperor's personal perfume would have been a grave insult. The scents were a part of the complex vocabulary of rank and privilege. Historians are still trying to reconstruct the exact scent palette of the Inca elite. The Spanish chroniclers occasionally mention the use of perfumes and scented powders, but they rarely recorded the specific ingredients, which they probably didn't know. The research now relies on a combination of archaeology, analyzing residues in ancient pottery vessels, and desirability, studying the traditional uses of plants by modern Andean communities, which often preserve ancient knowledge. The debate continues on how widespread the use of personal fragrance was. Was it a daily habit for the elite, or something reserved only for the most important ceremonies? As the nobles passed by, their subtle fragrance mingling with the air, you understand that beauty in the Inca Empire was a multi-sensory experience. It wasn't just what you saw: the shining hair, the golden jewelry, the vibrant textiles. It was also what you smelled: the scent of flowers, seaweed, and sacred resin was an invisible cloak of status, a fragrant whisper that said, "I am different. I am important. You've been dazzled by the gold and silver of the nobility, materials that you instinctively associate with wealth and power. But now, as you watch a ceremonial dance unfolding in the plaza, you realize you were wrong about what constitutes the ultimate luxury in this world. It is not metal. It has feathers. The dancers are adorned with spectacular headdresses, capes, and banners made from the brightly colored feathers of tropical birds. The sheer vibrancy is breathtaking. You see the electric blue of the cotinga, the brilliant scarlet of the maca, the emerald green and sunny yellow of other parrots and toucans. In the Inca economy, feathers were, ounce for ounce, often more valuable than gold. Gold was plentiful in the Andes. You could mine it from the mountains, but these feathers came from the Antisuyu, the vast, dangerous, and mysterious jungle region to the east. To get them required long, perilous expeditions into a territory that the Highland Incan ever fully conquered. The birds themselves were small, and each one provided only a few of the most desirable, brightly colored plumes. The process of hunting or trapping them, plucking the feathers, and transporting them back up into the mountains was incredibly difficult and labor-intensive. This rarity and the exotic origin of the feathers are what made them the supreme status symbol. To wear a garment of feathers was to display your connection to the farthest, most untamed reaches of the empire. It was a visible manifestation of power over nature and geography. You were watching a nobleman whose tunic is covered in a mosaic of tiny yellow feathers. It seems to glow with an inner light. This is Cuompe cloth of the highest order, but instead of woven patterns, the design is created by a technique called featherwork. Artisans would attach each individual feather to a cloth backing, overlapping them like shingles on a roof to create a seamless surface of pure, shimmering color. The craftsmanship is almost unbelievable. The Sapa Inca's litter, you recall, were shaded by a canopy of feathers. His honor guard carried tall banners decorated with intricate feather mosaics. During the most important religious festivals, priests and nobles would wear massive, wing-like constructions of feathers on their backs, transforming them into half-human, half-bird divine beings. The beauty of feathers was dynamic. Unlike static gold, they moved. They ruffled in the wind, shimmered in the sun, and created a soft, rustling sound. They made the wearer seem alive, vibrant, and otherworldly. Here is a curious fact about this feather economy. The Inca may have practiced a form of sustainable harvesting. Some accounts suggest that instead of killing the most prized birds, they would be captured, plucked of their finest feathers, and then released back into the wild to grow more. This suggests a sophisticated understanding of resource management, though historians still debate how widespread this practice actually was. Was it a conservationist mindset, or just practical economics to ensure a continued supply? The answer is likely a bit of both. The symbolism of the feathers was also profound. Birds, with their ability to fly, were seen as messengers between the earthly realm and the world of the gods in the sky. To wear their feathers was to align yourself with this spiritual power. Different colors had different meanings. Red and yellow were associated with the sun and royalty. Blue and green were linked to the jungle, water, and fertility. A single headdress could be a complex tapestry of symbolic meaning, a prayer made visible. As the dance reaches its climax, the participants spin, and their feathered costumes become a whirlwind of color. It has a beauty that is ephemeral and alive. You realize that while a golden cup is impressive, it is also cold and inert. A feather cape, on the other hand, is a piece of the living, breathing, vibrant jungle, brought up into the austere highlands. It is a testament to the empire's power and a connection to the most potent life forces in their cosmos. The Spanish, in their hunger for precious metals, melted down the gold. But the feathers, fragile and organic, simply decayed and disappeared, leaving us with only a few miraculous survivors in dry coastal tombs and the awestruck descriptions of the chroniclers. You are witnessing a form of beauty that was, by its very nature, destined to be lost to time. You spent most of your time in Cusco, the imperial capital, and you redeveloped a strong sense of the official Inca aesthetic. The long hair, the unibrow, the geometric textiles, the obsession with golden feathers for the elite. But the Inca Empire, or Tawantinsuyu, was enormous. It stretched for over 500 miles along the spine of the Andes, from modern-day Colombia down to Chile and Argentina. It encompassed scorching deserts, humid jungles, and frigid highlands. And the people within it were not a monolith. They were a patchwork of hundreds of different ethnic groups, each with its own history, language, and customs long before the Inca conquered them. So, you decide to take a trip. You join a caravan of llamas heading south, traveling along the remarkable Inca road system. As you leave the Cusco Valley, the landscape changes, and so do the people. You enter the territory of the Cola people. Around the high, windswept plains of Lake Titicaca, here, the ideal of beauty shifts. You still see the long, dark hair and the practical, woven clothing, but the details are different. The most striking feature of the Cola nobility was their distinct, conical head shape, a form of cranial modification that was their proud ethnic marker. Their tunics are different, too. The patterns are still geometric, but they favor different motifs and color combinations than the ones you saw in the capital. They often wear distinctive pointed or four-cornered hats made of wool, a style unique to this region. A Cola noblewoman might find the specific aesthetics of a Cusco courtier to be a bit foreign, perhaps even plain in their own way. Her beauty is defined by her connection to her own land and her own ancestors. The Inca state, in its pragmatic brilliance, didn't try to erase these local identities. In fact, they often reinforced them, as long as you paid your taxes, provided your labor, and revered the Sapa Inca as a divine being. You were generally allowed to maintain your own customs, dress, and standards of beauty. This created a fascinating imperial system where a universal Inca identity was layered on top of a deep-rooted local one. You continue your journey, this time heading west, down towards the coast. As you descend from the highlands, the air grows warmer and thicker. The people change again. Here, in the hot, dry desert valleys, people are more likely to wear cotton than wool. The colors of their textiles are different, reflecting the different plants and minerals available for dyes in this region. You see people from the Kaimu culture, a powerful kingdom that the Inca had conquered not long before. The Kaimu had their own ancient and sophisticated artistic traditions. Their pottery, their metalwork, and their textiles featured different designs, often more focused on maritime themes like fish, seabirds, and waves. A Kaimu fisherman, his skin weathered dark by the sea sun, might have his own ideas about beauty. Perhaps for him, a beautiful body is not the brawny Highlander's physique, but a leaner, more agile form, suited for navigating a reed boat. He might not care for the unibrow, preferring a different facial aesthetic. This is a topic historians are constantly exploring. How much did the imperial Inca aesthetic actually penetrate the daily lives of the common people in the provinces? For the local elite, who had to interact with Inca governors, adopting some Inca styles, like wearing a fine tunic gifted by the Sapa Inca, was a political necessity. But for a farmer or a fisherman, life and beauty standards probably remain deeply local. Here was a curious piece of trivia. Sometimes these regional differences could cause issues. One Spanish chronicler tells a story of how a group of nobles from a jungle region, the Chachapoyas, were known for their relatively fair skin and were considered very handsome by the Inca. The Sapa Inca was so taken with their appearance that he decreed that his personal guard should be made up entirely of Chachapoyas men. This preference for a specific regional look created a new, complex layer in the empire's social and aesthetic hierarchy. Your journey shows you that there was no single, universal Inca beauty standard. Instead, there was a dominant, high-status standard emanating from Cusco, which existed in conversation and sometimes in tension with a vast multitude of local ideals. The empire was a tapestry, and its beauty was in the diversity of its threads, all held together by the strong frame of Inca rule. To be beautiful in the empire wasn't about conforming to one look, but about perfectly embodying the look of your people, of your place. It was a beauty of authenticity, of belonging to a specific piece of the vast imperial puzzle. As you spend more time in this world, you start to notice the older people, in many modern cultures obsessed with youth, the signs of aging, wrinkles, gray hair, a less firm physique, are often seen as things to be fought, hidden, or corrected. But here, the attitude is profoundly different. Aging is not a decline. It is an accumulation of respect. You see an old woman sitting in the sun, her hands busy spinning wool with a drop spindle. Her face is a beautiful map of her life. The deep lines around her eyes and mouth are not seen as imperfections. They are a testament to the decades of laughter, sorrow, and hard work she has experienced. They are a record of her wisdom. In a society without written histories for the common person, the elders were the libraries. They held the stories, the genealogies, the knowledge of farming techniques, and the memory of religious rituals. A wrinkled face was the cover of a very important book. Gray hair, while sometimes dyed black with plant-based concoctions, was not universally seen as undesirable. For a man, a touch of silver at the temples could signify his status as a community leader, an ALLU elder whose advice was sought and valued. It was a physical sign of the wisdom he had earned. He was no longer just a strong worker. He was a source of guidance. His beauty shifted from one of physical power to one of intellectual and social authority. What about scars? In a society that engaged in warfare and heavy physical labor, scars were common. A man might have a jagged line across his forearm from a farming accident or a battle with a neighboring tribe before the Inca enforced peace. These were not seen as disfigurements. A scar was a story. It was physical proof of your courage, your resilience, your survival. A young man was smooth, unblemished skin might be handsome, but an older man with a few well-earned scars was respected. He had lived. He had fought. He had endured. His skin was a testament to his strength. This is a point that is often lost in our interpretation of ancient aesthetics. We tend to project our own biases onto the past. But the Inca worldview celebrated the entire arc of life. Each stage had its own form of beauty and its own value. All this beauty was in its potential and health. Young adultess beauty was in their strength and vitality, and an elderess beauty was in their wisdom and experience. There was no desperate clinging to a single, fleeting moment of youthful perfection. Historians are still debating the specifics of elder care and reverence within the Inca state. The Spanish chroniclers, coming from a society that also theoretically respected its elders, were nonetheless impressed by the deep, structural role that older people played in Andean society. They weren't simply retired. They transitioned to different, but equally important, tasks. An old man who could no longer work the fields would teach the young boys how to make tools or recount the history of their people. An old woman whose eyesight was too poor for fine weaving would watch over the children or serve as a community midwife. They were never seen as useless. Why fascinating and slightly morbid. Piece of trivia related to this is the role of the mummified ancestors. The Inca didn't just respect the living elders. They revered the dead ones. The mummies of the ancestors were the most powerful members of the community. They were consulted on important decisions, offered food and drink, and treated as living presences. This created a cultural mindset where the transition into old age was not a step towards oblivion, but a step towards becoming a powerful, eternal ancestor. You look again at the old woman spinning wool. Her movements are slow but sure, a practiced grace honed over a lifetime. She looks up in her eyes, though clouded with age, are brightened alert. She is beautiful not in spite of her age, but because of it. In this world, a long life was a gift and a great achievement. The marks of that life were not flaws to be erased, but a crown of honor to be worn with pride. You've spent weeks, maybe months, observing the static elements of beauty, the colors, the hair, the jewelry, the body modifications. You've seen the people at work and at rest, but you haven't truly understood Inca beauty until you see it in motion. Today is Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun, the most important celebration of the year. The entire city of Cusco has been preparing for days, and now the great plaza is a swirling vortex of color, sound, and energy. This is where all the individual aesthetic elements you've learned about come together and come alive. The theoretical becomes viscerally real. You see the military commander. His black and white checkerboard tunic no longer just a uniform, but a moving banner of authority as he directs a procession. The golden ear spools of the nobles are not just static ornaments. They flash and sway as they walk, catching the sun in a dazzling display. Each flash a tiny echo of the great god Inti they are here to honor. The long, black hair of the women is not just hanging down their backs. It is swinging, fanning out, and becoming part of the rhythm of the dance. Hundreds of dancers fill the plaza, organized by their ILLUN region. Now you can truly appreciate the diversity of the empire. A troop from the jungle frontier is adorned with brilliant macaw feathers, their movements energetic and wild. Next to them, a group from the high plains moves with a more solemn, stamping grace, their thick wool ponchos swirling around them. Each group has its own music, its own rhythm, its own unique dance steps. The air is filled with the sound of drums, the high-pitched notes of panpipers, and the haunting melody of flutes. The beauty here is collective and dynamic. It is not about an individual striking a pose for a portrait. It is about the community moving as one, creating a living, breathing work of art for the gods. The patterns on their tunics, which seemed like abstract geometry when seen up close, now merge and shift, creating large-scale visual effects. Rows of dancers wearing red create a flowing river of color. A group turning in unison makes their silver tiapos flash at the exact same moment, like a signal fire. You see the ACLOs, the chosen women, emerge from their cloister. They are a vision of grace and purity. Dressed in immaculate white wool, their movements are subtle, elegant, and perfectly synchronized. They carry offerings of chicha in golden cups, their performance a delicate and sacred counterpoint to the more boisterous dances of the warriors. Their secluded beauty is finally on public display, but it is a controlled, ritualized performance. This is a key point that historians emphasize. Inca art and aesthetics were rarely private. They were overwhelmingly public and performative. A beautiful tunic was meant to be seen in a ceremony, A powerful song was meant to be sung in a group. Beauty was a shared experience, a tool for social and religious cohesion. It reinforced the order of the cosmos, with the Sepa Inca at the center, the nobles in their orbits, and the common people forming the strong, vibrant foundation. The whole festival is a meticulously choreographed representation of the empire itself. Here's a small, curious detail you notice. Some of the dancers are wearing masks. These are not simple party masks, but elaborate creations made of wood, cloth, and even hammered metal. Some depict the faces of animals like pumas or condors. Others are stylized human faces with exaggerated features. Scholars are still debating the exact function of all these different masks. Some more clearly meant to represent specific spirits or ancestors, allowing the dancer to embody that being for the duration of the ritual. Others might have had a more theatrical function, representing characters in the mythological stories that were being reenacted. As the sun reaches its zenith, the Sepa Inca is brought into the center of the plaza on his golden litter. A hush falls over the tens of thousands of people. In this moment of collective awe, you finally understand. Inca beauty is not a checklist of features. It is a performance. It is the perfect execution of your role within the grand, cosmic drama. It is the harmony of your personal appearance with the collective identity of your people. It is the sun glinting off 1,000 golden ornaments at the exact same moment. It is the beauty of order, of community, and of divine power made manifest on earth. The festival is over, and a sense of normalcy returns to the streets of Cusco. But the memory of the celebration, with its emphasis on order and conformity, makes you think about the opposite. What happens when someone breaks the rules? You've learned that beauty and social standing are interwoven, so it stands to reason that punishment ugliness would be. 2. You see a man being led through a public square. His head is bowed, and people are openly jeering and pointing at him. He is not in chains, but he might as well be. His punishment is written on his body for all to see. His hair, which should have been long and black, has been crudely hacked off. It is patchy and uneven, a mess of sheared locks, as you learn it on your first day. This is one of the most severe and humiliating punishments the Inca could inflict. Forcibly cutting someone's hair was the ultimate act of public shaming. It was a punishment reserved for crimes that disgraced the community, such as adultery, theft from a fellow ALLU member, or cowardice in battle. It didn't just make you look ugly in a superficial sense. It stripped you of your social identity. Your long hair was a symbol of your health, your strength, your lineage, and your good standing. To have it taken from you was to be rendered an on-person. You were publicly marked as someone who had betrayed the community as trust. The psychological impact would have been devastating. Every person you met would know your shame at a single glance. This is a chillingly effective form of social control. In a society that placed such a high premium on conformity and community honor, the threat of this kind of public humiliation was a powerful deterrent. It was, in some ways, worse than a physical beating, because the shame endured long after the pain faded. The hair would eventually grow back, but the memory of the disgrace would remain. This leads you to a strange and fascinating tidbit of Inca and aesthetics. If hair was so important, did they have rules about styling it? Absolutely. As you've seen, different hairstyles could signify your ethnic group or rank. A noble from Cusco wore a different fringe than a commoner from the provinces. To adopt a hairstyle that was not appropriate for your station was a serious transgression. It was seen as an act of fraudulent self-representation, like forging a document. There are accounts of people being punished for cutting their hair in a style reserved for a higher class. It was an attempt to cheat the rigid social system, and it was not tolerated. Historians are still piecing together the full code of Inca hairstyles from pottery and the notes of Spanish chroniclers. The sheer variety is stunning, but it was a variety with very strict rules. It wasn't about personal expression or following fleeting trends. Your hairstyle was a uniform you were born into. The debate continues about the level of punishment. Would a minor hair infraction get you a stern warning? Or would it lead to public shaming? It likely depended on the context and the severity of the impersonation. This concept of punishment as ugliness extended beyond just hair. A person found guilty of a serious crime might be forced to wear shabby, undyed clothing, a stark contrast to the vibrant, patterned textiles of their community. They could be exiled, forced to live on the fringes of society, where their unkempt appearance would reflect their social isolation. The ultimate punishment, of course, was death, but for many social crimes, the goal was just to eliminate the offender, but to make an example of them. And the most effective way to do that was to make them visibly ugly, to turn them into a walking embodiment of social disorder. You look again at the shorn man being paraded through the square. The crowd's reaction is not one of sympathy, but of communal disapproval. He has broken the social contract, and his ugliness is now a necessary part of reinforcing the community's beauty. His shame is a lesson for everyone else. It is a stark reminder that in the Inca world, beauty was not a personal attribute you owned. It was a privilege granted to you by your community and the state, and it could be revoked at any time. You become accustomed to the faces, clothes, and rhythms of the Inca world. The sight of a man with a sloping forehead and golden ear spools no longer seems strange. It seems normal. Correct. The world feels orderly, predictable. And then, one day, everything changes. Ships arrive on the coast. Ships larger and stranger than any reed boat the coastal people have ever seen. And from them come men who look like they are from another planet. This is the moment of contact. The arrival of Francisco Pizarro and his Spanish conquest offers. You standing in a provincial town square when a small contingent of these newcomers arrives. The first thing you notice is the metal. They are encased in it. Their chests are covered in steel breastplates. Their heads in metal helmets, or morions. The sun, which you associate with the life-giving gold of the Cepa Inca, glints our fisto, gray, and menacing material. It is a hard, aggressive beauty, completely alien to the softer, more organic aesthetic of the Andes. Then you see their faces. Their skin is unnervingly pale, a stark contrast to the warm, sun-kissed tones of the Andes. In the harsh mountain sun, it looks fragile, unhealthy, prone to turning red and peeling. But the most shocking feature, the one that causes murmurs to ripple through the crowd, is their facial hair. They have beards, thick, full, and in some cases, unruly beards that cover the lower half of their faces. This is a profound aesthetic shock. Inca men, and Andean men in general, have very little facial hair. Any sparse hairs that might grow on the chin or upper lip are meticulously plucked out with small tweezers made of copper or bronze. A smooth face is the standard of beauty and cleanliness. To be hairy is to be unkempt, even animalistic. And here are these men, covered in it. Their faces are obscured, their expressions hard to read behind the mass of hair. The Inca refer to them as barbudos, the bearded ones. It is not a compliment. They are also taller than the average Indian man. Their frames long and lanky rather than sturdy and compact. They move differently, their long strides seeming awkward and out of place on the familiar stone path. They ride on strange, enormous beasts, horses, that are equally terrifying and fascinating to the local population, who have never seen an animal larger than a llama. The cultural and aesthetic clash is total. Every single marker of beauty and order you have come to understand is being violated. The Inca value long, black, straight hair. The Spanish have hair of varying colors: brown, red, and textures, often cut short. The Inca value clean, open faces. The Spanish have beards. The Inca value colorful, patterned textiles that speak of community and lineage. The Spanish wear a mixture of dark, heavy wools, velvets, and hard, cold steel. The Inca smell of clean water and subtle plant fragrances. The Spanish, after months at sea in heavy clothing, smell of sweat, and washed wool, and metal. Historians are still trying to fully grasp the initial sensory and aesthetic impact of this encounter. The Inca and the Spanish were, in many ways, aesthetic opposites. What one culture saw as beautiful, the other saw as bizarre or even ugly. The Spanish, for their part, saw the Inca's elongated heads, stretched ears, and unibrows as signs of a primitive, pagan barbarism. The Inca saw the Spaniards' pale skin and hairy faces as signs of sickness or strangeness. This moment is the beginning of a cataclysmic shift. The arrival of these men is not just a military invasion. It's an aesthetic one. They bring with them not only new weapons and new diseases, but also new ideas about what a person should look like, how they should dress, and what constitutes beauty. You watch as a Spanish soldier, his helmet tucked under his arm, reveals a sweaty, hairy face. He grins, and his teeth are not the worn-down pegs of a coca chewer, but are perhaps crooked or missing in their own way. The Inca onlookers are a mixture of fearful, curious, and repulsed. The world as they knew it, with its predictable and deeply understood standards of beauty and order, has just been broken. The bearded men have arrived, and nothing will ever be the same. The initial shock of the Spaniards' arrival begins to settle into a tense period of observation and misunderstanding. You are now in a unique position to witness not just what the Spanish thought of the Inca, but what the Inca thought of the Spanish. How did they process the appearance of these strange, bearded men? The answer is complex and reveals a great deal about their own worldview. You listen to the hushed conversations among the Inca commoners and nobles. The beards are a constant topic of discussion. They are seen as unnatural and unclean. The Inca practice of plucking out any facial hair was tied to their ideal of a clean, sheer body. To them, the Spaniards' refusal to do this was baffling. Why would anyone choose to walk around with their face covered in hair like a wild animal? Some speculate that perhaps they are not strong enough to endure the pain of plucking, a subtle jab at their manhood. Their pale skin is another source of fascination and revulsion. In the powerful Andean sun, which the Inca revered as a god, this skin was a liability. It burned, it blistered, it peeled. It looked unhealthy and ill-suited to the environment. The Inca, with their bronze and copper skin tones, were perfectly adapted to their world. The Spanish looked fragile, like they were perpetually sick. This led to a strange and persistent rumor, recorded by later chroniclers. Some Inca believed that the Spanish were a type of vampire or monster called a Siri. They were thought to sneak into people's homes at night and suck out their body fat, which they needed to sustain their own weak and sickly bodies. This myth was likely born from the visual evidence of the Spaniards' pale, unhealthy appearance. Then there was the smell. After months at sea and wearing heavy, rarely washed woolen and leather clothing, the Spanish did not smell pleasant to the hygiene-obsessed Inca. The combination of stale sweat, damp wool, and metallic armor was a world away from the clean scent of water and subtle plant perfumes of the Inca elite. This sensory assault was just as jarring as the visual one. However, the Inca perception of the Spanish was not entirely negative. It was also filled with a sense of awe and confusion. Initially, some Inca, including the emperor Atahualpa himself, were not sure what to make of these beings. Were they men? Or were they gods? Spanish arrived on the coast at a time of civil war and prophecy within the Inca Empire. One prophecy spoke of the return of the creator god, Viracocha, who was sometimes described as being bearded and fair-skinned. For a brief, fateful moment, there was a debate. Could these be the emissaries of Viracocha? This question, men or gods, is a point of major historical contention. For a long time, the popular narrative was that the Inca were paralyzed with religious awe, believing the Spanish to be gods and thus allowing them to conquer the empire. However, most modern historians now argue that this idea was greatly exaggerated by the Spanish themselves to make their conquest seem more miraculous and divinely ordained. The reality is that Inca leaders like Atahualpa were likely skeptical but cautious. They saw the Spaniards' powerful weapons and their steel armor that could repel Inca weapons, and their terrifying horses. They recognized this as a powerful military force, whether human or divine, and they treated them with a mixture of strategic curiosity and caution. You can feel this tension in the air. When an Inca noble looks at a Spanish conquistador, he is not just seeing an ugly, hairy man. He is seeing a puzzle. He is seeing a being with demonstrably powerful technology and strange, unsettling physical features. He is weighing the stories of Viracocha against the evidence of his own senses. The Spaniard's armor is impressive, but his face is unkempt. His horse is powerful, but he smells bad. It's a confusing, contradictory package. As you observe this moment of profound cultural misreading, you realize that beauty standards are not just about attraction. They are about classification. They are how we make sense of the world, how we decide who is like us and who is other. For the Inca, the Spanish broke all the categories. They didn't fit. They were neither human in the way the Inca understood it, nor were they clearly gods. They were something other, something new and dangerous. And the Inca's inability to neatly classify them aesthetically was a prelude to the much larger political and military tragedy that was about to unfold. The years following the initial encounter are a blur of conflict, disease, and immense cultural upheaval. The Spanish conquest is not a single event, but a long, painful process, and as the old power structures crumble, so do the aesthetic ideals that they supported. You are now living in a colonized world, a place where two vastly different cultures are being forced into an uneasy and unequal union, and you are witnessing the slow, heartbreaking death of the Inca beauty standards you came to know. The first and most obvious casualty is the look of the elite. The Ori Jones, the big ears, are no more. The Spanish, seeing the stretched earlobes as a potent symbol of the old pagan authority, actively suppressed the practice. The massive golden ear spools were seized and melted down into ingots to be shipped back to Spain. The young noble boys were no longer initiated into their ranks. The older men who still had their stretched lobes were often mocked or forced to hide them. The sight of a man with long, empty loops of skin hanging from his ears, once a mark of supreme power, now became a symbol of a defeated and vanishing world. The same fate befell the practice of cranial modification. The Catholic Church, which arrived with the conquistadors, viewed head shaping as a barbaric, anti-Christian practice. Priests and colonial administrators forbade it, teaching the indigenous people that a child should be left in the natural form that God had given it. Within a few generations, The distinctive elongated and conical head shapes that had marked ethnic identity for centuries began to disappear. People started to look more and more alike. Their regional and ancestral identities, once written on their very bones, now erased. The clothing begins to change. 2. The Spanish introduced new materials, new styles, and a new sense of modesty. Indigenous people, especially those living in colonial towns and cities, are encouraged or forced to adopt European-style dress. Men start wearing trousers and shirts instead of the practical uncool. Women are made to wear blouses and heavy skirts. Their traditional and AKU undelicatim to revealing or to pagan. The vibrant, message-laden textiles of the past are replaced by plainer, more homogeneous clothing, while the incredible skill of weaving survives. The language of the tukapu begins to fade as the social structure it described is dismantled. Even the most fundamental standards, errant hygiene, are altered, while many indigenous people cling to their tradition of long, dark hair. The Spanish bring their own hairstyles. And soon, cutting one's hair is no longer a sign of disgrace, but simply a different fashion. The ritual and spiritual importance of daily bathing is lost on the new rulers. And while the Inca people themselves likely maintained their personal habits as much as possible, the communal, state-supported infrastructure of clean cities and public baths begins to fall into disrepair. This process of aesthetic colonization is complex and insidious. It's not just about forcing people to look different. It's about convincing them that their own traditions are inferior. The Spanish held up their own appearance. Pale skin, beards, European features, as the ideal. This created a new, painful social hierarchy based on recent proximity to the colonizers. This is a sad, cold fact of the period. To be considered beautiful in this new colonial society often meant looking more Spanish and less indigenous. Historians debate the speed and totality of this cultural loss. Was it a complete eradication, or a more complex process of blending and resistance? The evidence points to the latter. While the most dramatic practices like head shaping and ear stretching vanished, other traditions went underground. Weavers continued to incorporate ancient symbols into their textiles, sometimes hiding them within more European-style patterns. The use of the coca leaf, despite official disapproval, continued to be a cornerstone of Andean social and spiritual life. But as you walk through the streets of Cusco now, decades after the arrival of the Barbudos, the city looks and feels different. The stone walls are still there, a testament to the genius of the past. But the people moving between them are changed. The vibrant tapestry of distinct ethnic looks has been muted. The clear, visual language of status and identity has been garbled. You see a young woman, and she has her mother's dark hair, but she wears a Spanish-style skirt. You see a man whose face has the strong cheekbones of his ancestors, but he no longer wears the tunic of his ALLU. The old world is not gone entirely, but it is fading. It's beautiful, complex order slowly giving way to a new, imposed reality. Your journey through time feels like it's coming to an end. The sharp, vivid images of the Inca past, the gleaming gold, the bloody conquests, the slow fade of colonial rule, begin to feel like a long, intense dream. You find yourself back in the present day, standing once again in the highlands of Peru. You lay in a bustling market town, perhaps Paisac or Chinchero, not far from Cusco. The air is still thin and crisp. The sun is still bright. And all around you are the living echoes of the empire you just left. You see the women first. They sit behind blankets laden with produce and handicrafts, and they are a riot of color. They are wearing the direct descendants of the clothes you saw 500 years ago, the El Licola. The shoulder mantle is still warm, a vibrant rectangle of woven art. The champai, the wide belt, still cinches their waists. The basic forms are unchanged, but the context is entirely new. These clothes are no longer a state and first ethnic uniform. They are a choice, a proud declaration of identity in a world that has tried for centuries to erase it. The textiles themselves are breathtaking. You walk over to a stall where a woman is selling blankets. The patterns are not the rigid tukapu of the Inca nobility, but they are clearly born from the same design language. Intricate geometric shapes, stylized animals, and a sophisticated sense of color and balance. You ask about the colors, and the weaver smiles. She points to a small bowl of dried, fuzzy-looking insects. Cashino. She shows you a bundle of roots for the color brown, leaves for green. This is not a lost art. It is a living, breathing tradition, passed down from mother to daughter through countless generations. This ancient knowledge is now a source of economic empowerment, a way for these communities to thrive in the modern world by selling their unique artistry to travelers like you. And the hair. You see it everywhere. Young girls and old women alike wear their hair in the same timeless style, parted down the middle, woven into two long, thick, jet black braids, often tied at the ends with colorful woven cords. The unibrow is gone, a casualty of changing global standards. The shaped heads and stretched ears exist only in museums and in the DNA of the people. But the hair remains, a simple, powerful, and unbroken link to the past. It is still a symbol of health and heritage. This is the central theme that modern historians and anthropologists grapple with. How much of what we see today is a direct, continuous survival, and how much is a conscious revival? There is no simple answer, and the academic community continues to debate it. Some traditions, like the weaving techniques and the use of natural dyes, clearly have an unbroken lineage. Others may be part of a more recent cultural renaissance, a deliberate effort by Andean people to reclaim and celebrate their heritage in the face of globalization. The truth is likely a complex and beautiful mix of both. You see a tour group gather around them and demonstrating how to play a kene, the traditional Andean flute. It's haunting. Airy notes are the same sounds that filled the air during the Inti Raymi festival 5 centuries ago. The sound is an echo, a ghost of the past made real in the present. You realize that the Inca Empire was conquered, its state dismantled, its religion suppressed, but the Andean people were not erased. Their culture proved to be as resilient as their own bodies, which are so perfectly adapted to this high-altitude world. The beauty standard you've been chasing is no longer dictated by an emperor. It is now a beauty of survival, of resilience, of identity. It's in the proud smile of a woman wearing a hat that identifies her village. It is in the calloused, capable hands of a weaver transforming insects and leaves into a rainbow of color. It is in the long, dark braids of a young girl who will learn these traditions from her mother. The empire is gone, but its aesthetic soul, woven into cloth and carried in the blood, endures. The beauty of the Inca is not a relic of the past. It's a living, evolving story, and you are lucky enough to be here for its latest chapter. The sounds of the Andean market begin to soften now, the vibrant calls of the vendors and the haunting notes of the flute starting to fade into a gentle hum. Your long journey through time is complete. The images from the past, the glint of a golden ear spool in the sun, the impossible blue of a feather cloak, the stern face of a noble with his unbroken brow, start to lose their sharp edges, blending into the soft haze of memory, like figures in a dream you ray just beginning to leave behind. Let them drift. The story is told. The Seba Inca has retreated to his palace, The ACLs have returned to their cloister, and the Spanish ships have sailed into the mists of history. The faces and the facts begin to dissolve, leaving only the quiet feeling of the high-altitude air, the warmth of vicuna wool, and the deep, earthy colors of the land. There are no more details to learn, no more debates for the historians to settle tonight. The threads of the story have all been woven, creating a tapestry for you to rest upon. The brilliant red of the cochineal can become the warmth of the blanket around you. The deep black of the Inca's hair can become the peaceful darkness of your room. The story is now a part of your own quiet, and it can gently recede, making space for your own journey into sleep. The whispers of history are quieting down, letting the soft background hum of your fan take over, carrying you softly into a deep and peaceful rest.